Imagine driving down a dark highway in rural Brazil. The year is 1940. Your headlights cut through the fog rolling off a still, black lagoon. And then you see her, a woman in a white wedding dress, standing impossibly still on the side of the road. You blink and she's gone. But then you hear the stories from dozens of other drivers who've seen the exact same thing. The same desperate face. The same blood-stained gown. This isn't just a ghost story. This is the true story of Maria Luísa Haüssler, a 17-year-old girl who met a fate so horrific that her spirit has never found peace. Her murder became one of Brazil's most chilling cases of the 1940s. Night. I'm taking you back to 1940, to the shores of Lagoa dos Barros, to uncover what really happened to the girl they now call the Bride of the Lagoon. We'll explore the real police reports, the confession that revealed unthinkable cruelty, and decades of paranormal encounters that turned this highway into one of South America's most haunted locations. But this story is more than supernatural terror. It's a tragic reminder of something that still happens today. Maria Luísa's story is one of obsession, control, and violence. A young woman whose life was stolen by someone who claimed to love her. What you're about to hear includes actual testimonies from witnesses, historical records from the police investigation, and interviews with locals who've encountered her presence. Some of what you'll hear will disturb you, but I believe it's crucial that we tell Maria Luísa's story not to sensationalize her death, but to honor her memory and to understand why her spirit might still be reaching out from beyond the grave. This is the story of Maria Luísa Haüssler, the Bride of Lagoa dos Barros. After tonight, you'll never forget her name. Chapter 1, The Young Lovers. Our story begins in 1940, in the peaceful region between Santo, Antônio de Patrulha, and Osório, in southern Brazil. This area was known for its German immigrant communities, rolling hills, and the serene Lagoa dos Barros Lagoon, whose dark waters would soon become the center of a tragedy that would echo through generations. Maria Luísa Haüssler was just 17 years old. By all accounts, she was a vibrant young woman full of life and dreams. She lived with her family in a close-knit community where everyone knew each other. Her smile was infectious, her laughter filled the house. She helped her mother, attended church on Sundays, and dreamed of a future beyond the small town where she'd grown up. Ange Werner Joash Mellon was 19 years old. He came from a respectable family, and when he and Maria Luísa began courting, their families saw it as a natural match. Young love in a small town. At first, their relationship seemed sweet and typical. They would meet after church, take walks along the lagoon. But beneath the surface, something dark was growing, something possessive. As often happens in abusive relationships, the warning signs were there but dismissed. Ang's affection had a jealous edge that made her uncomfortable. He wanted to know where she was at all times, who she spoke to, who looked at her. This wasn't love, it was control. But in 1940, in a traditional community, these behaviors were sometimes mistaken for devotion. Friends would say, "He just loves you so much." Eventually, Maria Luísa realized the truth. Whatever feelings she'd had were smothered by his suffocating possessiveness. She couldn't breathe anymore. She made the brave decision. She ended the relationship. She told Ang it was over. She wanted her freedom back. Ang didn't take it well. He refused to accept it. He pleaded, made promises to change, sent letters, appeared wherever she went. In his mind, Maria Luísa belonged to him. If he couldn't have her, no one could. It's a story we've heard too many times. The same pattern of escalating behavior. The same refusal to accept rejection. But for Maria Luísa, this wasn't just a threat. It was a death sentence being written. Chapter 2. The night everything changed. A few weeks later, Maria Luísa went to a dance. A local baile where young people gathered to socialize and enjoy music. For her, it was a chance to reclaim her joy, to feel young and free again. She wore a favorite dress, did her hair carefully. She was excited to dance and laugh, but Ang was watching. He'd heard through gossip that she would be there, and he'd made his decision. If he couldn't control her anymore, he would make sure she never left him. The details are difficult to recount. Approached Maria Luísa at the dance. Witnesses saw them talking, saw her shake her head, saw fear in her eyes, saw her try to walk away. He followed her outside into darkness. He must have been planning it. He had brought a gun. Under the vast Brazilian sky, far from the music and laughter, Ang shot Maria Luísa directly in the heart. She was 17 years old. She died almost instantly, her dreams bleeding out onto the ground. Some accounts describe her dress as white, perhaps where the bride legend originates. But Ang's crime didn't end there. What he did next became the most horrifying part. Chapter 3. The lagoon's dark secret. Ang panicked. He needed to hide the evidence. He couldn't face the consequences. So he formulated a cold-blooded plan. He wrapped Maria Luísa's body in cloth and rope. Then, in a detail that still disturbs experts, he tied heavy bricks to her body. Multiple bricks, secured with rope, designed to ensure she would sink and never resurface. He wanted her to disappear completely, to vanish as if she'd never existed. In the dead of night, Eng drove to Lagoa dos Barros. The lagoon was deep and dark, surrounded by vegetation. He carried Maria Luísa's weighted body to the water's edge, and then he threw her in. The lagoon accepted her without resistance. Her body sank into the black water, down into the mud and darkness. Eng watched until there was no trace, then returned to his life as if nothing had happened. But Maria Luísa's family knew something was wrong. When she didn't come home, they began searching immediately. They contacted police. They questioned everyone at the baile. Slowly, the truth began to emerge. Chapter 4. The Confession. The investigation moved quickly once police focused on Eng. Neighbors had seen him. Following Maria Luísa, friends confirmed his obsession. The evidence was mounting. Within days, police brought Eng in for questioning. The interrogation lasted hours. At first, he denied everything. But as evidence piled up, his story cracked. Finally, Eng confessed. He admitted to shooting Maria Luísa. He admitted to tying bricks to her body. He admitted to disposing of her in the lagoon. The confession shocked everyone, not just because of the crime, but because of the cold, calculated nature of what he'd done. This wasn't passion ending in panic. This was murder followed by deliberate erasure. Police organized a lagoon search. Divers went into the dark water, feeling through murky depths. After extensive searching, they found her Maria Luísa's body, still weighted with bricks, exactly where Eng described. The discovery devastated the community. A young woman murdered by someone who claimed to care for her, disposed of like garbage. The trial was swift. Eng was convicted, but no sentence could bring her back. Her family buried her properly, giving her the dignity Eng tried to deny. But according to countless witnesses over decades, Maria Luísa's spirit never left Lagoa dos Barros. Chapter 5. The hauntings begin. The first sightings began months after her body was recovered. Drivers on the highway began reporting strange encounters. A young woman in white standing roadside late at night or in early morning fog. She would be perfectly still, staring at the lagoon or at passing cars. Some said she appeared soaking wet, dark hair plastered to her face. Others claimed they could see through her translucent, like mist-given human form. Quote, one consistent report involves drivers who stop to help. They see a young woman in distress and pull over. But as soon as they step out, she vanishes, literally disappearing into thin air, leaving only the smell of stagnant water and overwhelming sadness. Other witnesses reported more disturbing encounters. Some claimed to have seen a figure in white emerging from the water itself, walking toward shore before disappearing back into the depths. Always the same, a young woman in a flowing white dress, moving slowly, as if searching for something she can never find. Truck drivers who regularly travel this route have their own stories. Many refuse to drive past the lagoon late at night. They'll take longer routes or wait until dawn. When pressed, they describe an overwhelming feeling of being watched, of a presence in the vehicle, of seeing a pale face in their rearview mirror that disappears when they turn around. Some speak of vehicles losing power near the lagoon for no mechanical reason. Others describe radios switching to static or hearing a woman's voice crying softly through speakers. Local residents gave her a name, Noiva de Lagoa dos Barros, the Bride of Lagoa dos Barros. The bride designation symbolizes the life Maria Luísa never lived, the wedding day she never had, the future stolen from her. Chapter 6. The legend grows. As decades passed, the story evolved into one of Brazil's most famous, but unlike many legends that fade, this one remained tied to its tragic roots. People haven't forgotten a real girl died here. They haven't forgotten her name. Paranormal investigators have visited numerous times. Some claim to have captured recordings of a young woman's voice near the water's edge. Others photographed anomalies, unexplained lights, mists that seem to take human form, shadows moving against wind. What's particularly interesting is how the haunting seems connected to the crime location. Maria Luísa doesn't appear randomly. She appears at Lagoa dos Barros, where her body was hidden, where her life ended. Researchers suggest this indicates a spirit unable to move on from its greatest suffering. The highway has become notorious. There have been numerous accidents over the years, with drivers claiming they swerved to avoid her. Whether caused by paranormal activities, suggestion, or road conditions is impossible to prove, but the association is now firmly established. Chapter 7. A Voice for the Voiceless. In recent years, Maria Luísa's story has taken on new significance. As awareness of domestic violence has grown in Brazil and worldwide, her case has been revisited as an early example of a crime that's far too common, a woman killed by a partner. Women's rights advocates have embraced her story as a tragic reminder. Some have organized memorial events at Lagoa dos Barros, placing flowers and candles in her memory. These gatherings honor her and raise awareness about domestic violence. The phrase Noiva da Lagoa dos Barros has become more than a ghost story, it's a symbol. It represents all women whose lives were cut short by violence, whose stories deserve to be told. Perhaps Maria Luísa's spirit serves a purpose that keeps her story alive, ensures she's not forgotten, reminds us why we must do better. Local schools now teach about her case in discussions about relationship violence and recognizing warning signs. Counselors use her story to help young people understand that possessive behavior isn't romantic. It's dangerous. That you have the right to walk away from any relationship. Epilogue. The mystery continues. Today, more than 80 years after her murder, the sightings continue. As recently as this year, drivers have reported encounters near Lagoa dos Barros. The highway is now modern and well-traveled. But still, the apparitions persist. Some believe Maria Luísa's spirit remains because of the violent nature of her death. That trauma this severe can imprint itself on a location. Others think she stays to ensure her story is never forgotten, to be a voice for all victims of violence. Still others believe she's searching, perhaps for justice, perhaps peace, perhaps acknowledgement of what was taken. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain: Maria Luísa Haüssler was a real person. She had dreams and people who loved her. She deserved to grow old, to choose her own path, to live free from violence. Instead, she died at 17, murdered by someone who claimed to love her, her body hidden as if she'd never mattered. But she does matter, and as long as people tell her story, as long as drivers report seeing her figure by the lagoon, as long as we remember her name, Maria Luísa Haüssler will never be forgotten. The Bride of Lagoa dos Barros isn't just a ghost story. It's a true story. It's a tragedy. And it's a reminder that every victim of violence deserves to be remembered, honored, and mourned. If you've made it this far, thank you for listening to Maria Luísa's story. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. Resources are available. You deserve safety. You deserve freedom. You deserve life. Rest in peace, Maria Luísa. Your story has been told. You will not be forgotten.